Good afternoon, everyone. This is Haley Panagakis, and I'm an editor here with Connect. I'd like to welcome you to our March webinar and thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. We have a great session planned, but first I'd like to point out a few features you can use throughout the presentation. If you haven't printed the materials needed for this session, please do so via the link shown in the comment box on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also type in your questions for Dean by using that comment box, and if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share with Dean or me, feel free to submit those throughout the webinar. You can also use the comment box to give us feedback on the session as well. There will be more information about future webinars and education opportunities at the end of the program, but let's go ahead and get started. It's my privilege to formally introduce today's speaker, Dean Savoca. Dean Savoca is a keynote speaker, sales and management trainer, facilitator, and executive coach who started his career as a travel director and account manager with Merits. He holds a master's degree in organizational performance and change and is a board-certified coach. Dean speaks and trains all over the country, in addition to coaching his executive clients. He works with numerous meetings and events industry organizations and associations, such as DMCs, bureaus, and hotels. Dean, who will be speaking at our upcoming Connect Marketplace in Grapevine, Texas on August 25th through 27th, has conducted 9,000 executive coaching sessions and has boiled down his findings to 8 essential attributes of successful leaders, which he'll share with us today. Dean lives in Denver with his wife, a president of the Rocky Mountain Chamber of MPI, and their 2 daughters. So Dean, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Haley. Good morning to those of you that are on the West Coast, and good afternoon to the rest of you. Thank you for investing your time to be a part of this webinar today. And we have 2 main outcomes. I'm committed to you leaving this session with some great value based on 2 things. First is to create your own wheel of influence based on the 8 attributes that I'm going to share that is based on my findings having conducted those 9,000 coaching sessions. And secondly, before the end of the session, for you to choose which one of those pieces of the pie that you want to focus on that's going to have the most significant impact to balance your wheel and ultimately support you in having more influence. So I've conducted these 9,000 coaching sessions, many of them with executives, but also across industries, some with sales professionals. I have done with meeting planners as well, and many in the meetings and events industry. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is before you can influence your team or your staff or your boss or your board of directors or your organization or your community, you first have to have the ability to influence yourself. I also want to frame when I refer to successful leadership, it's not really leadership by position. It's more defined as success being achievement and fulfillment in all areas of your life, both professionally and personally, and leadership about the ability to influence yourself and others to get results. So here's the learning tool. You should have it in front of you. If not, there's a link right there in the chat that you can download it. Have this in front of you. We're going to start right up in the upper left-hand column, or the upper left-hand where you see the pie, where the R is. And as I share each one of these attributes, you're going to be doing a self-assessment. Basically be filling in somewhere between 1, just being that first line of the pie, or all the way out to the end, which would be a 5. If you're really rocking it in this area, feel great, feel like you're very strong in that area, then fill it all the way out to the end. And then just decide if you need a lot of support in that area, then kind of put it wherever you feel is appropriate for you. And this is a self-assessment, so it's totally up to you. It's going to be used by you, so just be honest and truthful with where you are so you can really use this as a personal development tool after we wrap up the session today. I also want to challenge you and invite you to stay engaged. I know it can be hard sometimes on a webinar and you're just hearing a voice and seeing some slides and you got your other work sitting there or maybe some people walking in or you want to jump on email. I really want to challenge you to stay engaged because if you do, you're going to leave here with some great value. And some of the things that I'm going to share, part of your brain may say, wait, I've heard some of this before. I heard someone speak on this, or I read a book about this. And I want to invite you to stay engaged in that you may hear it from a different perspective, or maybe you're hearing it and you're in a different place in your life. Or maybe you just need to hear it again because you haven't done anything with it, but it's a reminder of something that you know is important to you and something that you want to take some action on. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in with our first attribute. Successful leaders take 100% responsibility. They don't play the blame game where they're blaming things and making excuses and saying it's this person's fault or it's that's fault or it's because when we blame things that are outside of ourselves, we're giving away our personal power to take ownership and responsibility. I want to invite you to use the chat feature right here in thinking about what do you think the number one excuse is that I hear of why people are not getting the results they want in their life. What do you think are the biggest excuses that I hear of why people are not getting the results they want or achieving their goals or achieving what they want to accomplish professionally or personally? So go ahead and use the chat feature and send in some of those. In the meantime, Haley, I'm going to have you go ahead and play that first video. All right, do we have a challenge here in the video? I don't know if everyone heard it. I saw someone state that. But I saw basically it was a lot of excuses, and that's about keeping things in perspective. If we all have excuses of why we're not achieving something, and I read some of that you have in the chat, and you hit on the number one that I hear, and that's that if only I had more time. If I had more time, then I would be getting the results. Then I'd be able to balance my life with the stuff I got going on with my kids and my work commitments and all the work that I have for my boss. That's the number one excuse that I hear by far. And the second one is, I'm just so tired. So those are the two of the most common that I hear. But I want to challenge you to think about that all of those are excuses. And when we take full responsibility and stop making those excuses, then we're empowered. And it's not that it's not real. There is constraints on our time, but we all have an even amount of time. So it's taking responsibility of saying, I'm responsible, I'm empowered on how I respond to things, and it's not based or blamed on somebody else, because then it's always an excuse and we can't really do anything with it. The other point here, strategy that's common, this is something I learned. I spent some time working with Tony Robbins, and this is a big thing I learned from him, is the power of taking responsibility of managing our emotional state. Instead of blaming other people, think they make us feel this way, it's taking ownership and realizing that really our emotions are created internally. And our emotions are created in three ways. One is through our physiology. You ever heard the concept of smile before you pick up the phone? You know, our physiology is just how we move, how we breathe, affects the way we feel. The second is what we focus on. Whatever we focus on or believe in that moment, we're going to have an emotional response to. And the third is the language we use, because language is how we give meaning to situations, and then we respond to that meaning. So it's like when you ask somebody how they're doing, and they're like, oh, I'm getting by. Or you ask somebody else, and they're like, I'm doing fantastic. Right? When someone's just getting by, they kind of spend time and just getting by all the time, they're going to have a getting by day and a getting by week and a getting by life. So it's choosing the language and realizing that has an impact on our emotional state and taking responsibility for that. When we take 100% responsibility, it results in empowerment and trust. So I'd like you to take that first piece of the pie and fill it in. And just ask yourself, are you making excuses or are you taking 100% responsibility? Are you managing who you're showing up as and managing your emotions? Or is this something that you could work on? So go ahead and fill out that first piece of the pie now. All right, number two, successful leaders have a clear vision. This is a common question when I engage with an organization or with an individual in a coaching relationship, is I always start with, what do you want? What do you want? And I'm amazed at how many people don't even know the answer to that question. They haven't spent time to reflect and think about it. And one action I'd invite you to consider, if this is something you really want to get some clarity around, is give yourself the gift to go sit at a coffee shop, get a tea or a coffee, and just pad a paper or bring your computer or your iPad and just write down, what is it that you want. And you can ask yourself, this could be professionally. I like to break it into the different categories of life. What do I want professionally? What do I want in my intimate relationship? What do I want as a father? What do I want with my physical well-being, with my financials? And you can go through and just write a paragraph, write some bullet points, whatever works for you. But the key is to write it down. Successful folks spend the time to get clear on what they want, and they write it down and they make it real. And then they move to the next step, which is actually to visualize it. This is probably a concept you've heard about. Many people have heard of this, but they don't actually act on it, or they're doing it and they don't realize they're already doing it. But typically our brain has a tendency to go and visualize negativity. It goes into, it's trying to protect us and comes from more of a place of fear, and we're focused on what's the negative outcome that could happen in this situation. I like to focus, when I think about visualization, the Olympics. I've studied a lot of performance athletes in the work that I do, and I'm always amazed at how they're sitting, 4 years of training for an event that takes, 2 minutes, and for some of them seconds. And how do they perform at their best in that moment? And one tool they use is visualization. How often have you seen a skier in the gate before they leave and before they go and they're got their eyes closed because they're visualizing the course, or the skater before he or she steps on the ice? Visualization's a powerful tool. And then once you have a clear vision, it's to break that down into SMART goals. Another term you may have heard before: specific, measurable, actionable, taking a risk and given a time frame. Specific, measurable, actionable, taking a risk and given a time frame. Having a clear vision, knowing breaking it down into SMART goals, and then the last piece is to stay connected to what I call the real reason. This is the purpose, the why, the motivation comes from here. The analogy I like to use is to think about, think about the large interstate in your city or wherever you're near, and that has, think of 5 layers of traffic and lanes of traffic, and you have everyone going 75 miles an hour. How do you get across? Could you get across there? Could you walk across? Most people are like, no. But what if there was a loved one or a child that needed help on the other side? And what is it that changed? What changed is the why, the motivation. Many people know how to do something, but they still don't follow through. They even know what they want, but they don't follow through. When we have a big enough reason why, we figure out the how-to. When we have a big enough reason why, we figure out the how-to. When we have a clear focus, it results in a clear vision, it results in focus and motivation. So once again, get clarity on the vision, break it down into SMART goals that are specific and measurable, then add in your real reason underneath the goal. So you have an emotional connection, the motivation to make the goal emotional, because that's what drives our behavior. Those are some of the strategies. Someone asked on the chat just how to fill in the pie again. So how you do that, once again, if you're doing really well in that area, so we've already covered the top 2. Upper left is R for responsibility. The next one is vision. Is fill in down below and just where the 1 is or where the 2 is if you need a lot of support in that area and you have a lot of growth opportunity. And then go all the way out to the end, right next to the V or the R if you're really solid in this area. So that's how you fill that out. And go ahead and ask where you are in this area around vision. Have you spent the time? Do you know what you want, even for the rest of 2016? And if you'd like, put it out there for 5 years or 10 years in the future, whatever feels right for you. Have you spent time to reflect on your why or your real reason? Is it clear and written down? I have a lot of folks who say it's in their head, but have you spent the time to write it down, or would that be a good action for you? And are you visualizing it so you can actually see it? Think about and visualize yourself being successful, just like those Olympic athletes. So go ahead and mark where you are on this one. Number 3, successful leaders demonstrate balance. This was a common one that I found when working with a lot of successful people and a lot of executives. How often I would always ask folks, from a coaching relationship, or what are your top 3 goals in the next 90 days? And I found that time frame worked effectively. Like a year, I'm all about setting annual goals, but chunking it down to a quarter or 90 days makes it more real, and it's far enough out where the goal can be big, but it's close enough in that it creates a sense of urgency that you need to be taking some action on a weekly basis, because it's only 13 weeks before that deadline. and then having no more than 3 goals. I find that when people have more than 3 goals, sometimes it can become a distraction and they lose their focus. Once again, you can use the chat feature to send in some of your strategies, because you may have some strategies in this area that other people could benefit as well. I'm sharing what I've learned in all the coaching sessions that I've done, but I also invite you to share some with each other. Slow down in order to speed up. The analogy I like to use here is if you're going down the street and you got a flat tire, are you going to get to your destination quicker if you pull over and change a tire, or if you just keep your foot on the gas? And identifying your success habits. By the way, this is a session that I'm going to be doing at Connect Marketplace in Grapevine, is helping people understand and identify what their success habits are when they're at their best, so they can use those to turn slumps into success. And that's going to be the session that I'll be doing in Grapevine. So what I find with these success habits, most people had consistent habits that were successful, especially around their well-being, around their physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual wellness. And they had habits around those areas that they knew when they did these things, it set their day up for success. So that's a question I always ask myself every morning is, what am I doing today for my physical well-being? Mental. Mental has to do with learning or growing or reading something. Emotional. For me, that's quality time or connecting with my wife, my 2 daughters, and then expanding that to extended family and friends. And then spiritual. Some type of spiritual connection could be prayer, meditation, reading that helps to stay connected. But that was a common theme I saw. And then challenge your rules. Rules are those things that we set that limit us from things that we want to accomplish. I had one, for example, that was, it's not exercise. It doesn't count as a good day of exercise if I don't run 3 miles. And then I had some health challenges where I couldn't run. And so it's like, so do I not go at all? Because that's what happens to most people in my experience is they start saying, if it's not going to be this, if I don't have time to go to the gym for an hour and a half, then it doesn't count, but then they don't go at all. So lowering those rules where you don't have these rules that it has to be a certain way in order for it to count. Another great example, I was working with a client he owns a few restaurants in the Denver area, and he actually just opened up the 3rd restaurant, just had his 2nd child, and he was really stressed. And I asked him, well, what have you done in the past that's helped you to deal with stress? And he said, well, I used to meditate, and it was just the best. He goes, I had this CD. It was like, I'd spend like 45 minutes. I had this place I would go and just relax, and it just was great. And I said, well, what would it do for you when you meditated? And he goes, it was so, I was a better father. I was a better husband. I thought more clearly. I made better decisions for my business. I was great with my employees. I ate healthier. I mean, he just had this laundry list of all the impact it had for him. And, of course, I'm like, well, why? Well, how about you meditate? What a great coach, right? Why don't you meditate? It worked before. Well, because I don't have enough. Yep, you got it. Excuse. I don't have enough time. Oh, you don't have enough time to think clearly and be a great husband and father and eat healthy and make better business decisions, be more efficient and have more energy. Then I worked with them to say, well, what is it that is really the core of this meditation? He went through and it kind of came down to these 3 things. And I said, well, what would it take just to do those 3 things? And he said, oh, I could do those things in 8 minutes. And so we kind of created this 8-minute meditation, and and the results were just amazing for him because he let go of the rule that it had to be 45 minutes and he had to listen to this certain CD and it had to be this full thing, and he found the shortcut, if you will, that still got him the results and had the impact, but it wasn't reliant on rules. When we demonstrate balance, it results in energy. So go ahead and ask yourself, do you know what some of your success habits are? And I'd love to see a few people send it in. If you know, like, hey, when I do this in the morning or I have this routine, it really sets me up for success. If you know what some of yours are, go ahead and send those in through the chat as well. And do you find yourself, are you building a foundation or do you have a foundation of health and wellness? Or is this an area that you can grow in? I've worked a lot with meeting planners. This is one of the ones that I found often, that the balance piece can be something that can really get off kilter for them. So go ahead and fill in this pie piece now. Number 4, successful leaders focus on their strengths. They play to their strengths. They know that research shows, Gallup did a lot of research on this. In fact, Marcus Buckingham, some of you may be familiar with, was a past CEO of Gallup, as well as he has a whole strengths movement in a book called Discover Your Strengths, which has a great assessment in it, by the way. And what they learn, though, is there's more opportunity to build and grow on our strengths than there is to fix our weaknesses. And successful leaders, in my experience, get really good at identifying what they're best at so they can do that and have the biggest impact. They contribute with their strengths because they know that's what's going to have the biggest impact. I find often, they volunteer, by the way. Those of you that volunteer, you find when you volunteer, what happens when you're a great volunteer? And I'm sure many of you belong to MPI or PCMA. What happens when you're a great volunteer? That's right. They give you more. Just give them more, right? Getting really good at giving back where you can contribute with your strengths is a great thing. That's something I've learned to do. When I give back to the church and school with my kids, I'll MC the auction or I'll work with the strategic planning for the organization, but I say no to a lot of other things. And it's the same thing within an organization where you can have, and I understand there's always going to be work you have to do that's not perfectly aligned. But if you're not spending the majority of your time that's aligned with your strengths in the organization, then something's not right. You're not having the bigger impact. So it's finding out where you can contribute and align your strengths is a common habit of those that are successful. Haley, let's go ahead and play the second video if you would.
I'm the greatest pitcher in the world.
Isn't that great? The last point here that I've identified with strengths is to be able to transfer our strengths. I often find that folks have a challenge in kind of the big buckets of life, like let's say, intimate relationship, financials, physical well-being. Usually one of those, I hear folks be like, you don't understand. I'm really messed up in this area. I've never been able to keep my financials straight, or I've never been able to keep a good relationship, or I've always been struggled with overweight or not eating healthy or exercise. And they have kind of a story around one of those areas, and it keeps them, kind of becomes a block, an excuse, if you will, of them being successful. But here's an insight I've had, a great insight from all these sessions that I've conducted, and that's that often you can learn from a different area of your life and what was it that worked that created the success in that area, and you can pick up the strategies and apply it to this other area. For example, I had a client that I was working with, and I was working with him he was a general manager of a business, and to help him to be more effective as a manager. And he kept saying over and over, but I just don't have the discipline. I don't have any discipline. And that was his excuse, like, I don't have any discipline to be a good manager. I won't be able to be consistent. And I was looking at this guy. I was with him in person. I was looking at him, and this guy is physically rock solid. And I asked him, I said, well, how about discipline around your physical well-being to get your body looking like that? And he's like, oh, well, that's different. I go, how many days a week do you work out? Oh, 6 days a week. It's different? And I said, is it? I had him reflect on that for a few moments. And then it hit him that it's not. So I invite you to look at areas of your life where you've had some success and think about what are some of your strategies that worked for you. And then think of another area that maybe you need some support, you need to grow in, or that maybe you have a story around that you haven't been able to be successful, and say, can I learn something? Can I transfer my strengths from this area and apply them over here? Focusing on our strengths results in not only performance, not only do we get great results, but it brings us fulfillment. And by the way, a strength is something that we're great at. We've gotten positive feedback from other people, and we enjoy it. We enjoy doing it. So go ahead and fill out where you are on this one. Fill out the pie in the wheel. First of all, do you know your strengths? Or would that be a good action to take an assessment or to ask people for some feedback or to spend some time reflecting on it? Are you aligned? Are you contributing with your strengths, whether that be professionally or in your volunteer time? And are you able to transfer your strengths? Is there another area of your life that you could learn from or that you have done this already? Or could this be a good action for you? All right, so how are those wheels looking so far? We're halfway through here. How's the shape of your wheel looking so far? Haley, is there any questions that have come in? I'm not able to keep track of all the chat that's going on. I see a few things coming in, but anything that's come in that's a good question or that I could address?
Hey, Dean. So far, we've had a lot of comments, not as many questions.
Great.
Alexandra, she from Florida, sorry. When you were talking about balance, she said, lists, couldn't function without them. And I know that's true for me and probably true for a lot of event planners out there.
Well, I think that's, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to comment on one of the other comments we got in.
Yeah, actually, that's going to be a perfect transition to the next point around lists, but go ahead. If there was another question or comment that came in, we have time for one more.
Julie Michelle Davis from Texas, she said that when she runs in the morning, she's more focused in the morning. And she's not a morning person, so running at 4 a.m. helps her to wake up and get more productive earlier in the workday, which is a great comment for me because I am not a morning person. So it's a great idea.
Great. So first of all, great for challenging yourself to get up and do the 4 a.m. I love that, right? And I would also invite, I know this not a morning person, be aware of that you could get caught up in that can keep us from doing something. And I'm not saying it may be true that you have less energy or more energy at different times a day. But I love that even though you had that belief that you were able to challenge it and see the benefits, your real reason, your why was big enough that say no. But when I start my day like this, it sets me up, and it's a great habit that makes me better for the day, more productive. So that's a great one to share. And the list one, that's a perfect transition to our next point. Successful leaders do action planning. And part of this, some of the strategies that I've seen here is one is they schedule time to think and plan. Because what happens is we get so busy, and it's always go, 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 and more. But more time does not always equal more results. So having time to actually be strategic, to think, to reflect, and to plan, we actually can get better results. I'm actually doing this now. I'm finding the whole concept of, and I know you all are seeing this. I've been involved with convening leaders in WEC, and the concept of white space. People are looking for more white space. And I have a colleague of mine where we take groups and boards and teams up to the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, to get away. It's still intentional. It's still purposeful. But instead of just a packed agenda where you have no time to think and reflect, we work in time to maybe sit around a campfire or watch a sunrise or go on a hike with a colleague and reflect on a question or something that they're working on. And we're actually finding that people get more creative, more innovative, and solve more problems when they're able to get in that type of environment and have a little more open space to do that. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing for us individually, is to create space and time that we have for thinking and planning. And I know what goes on, that little voice in your head, because I've heard it too. Well, wait, I don't have time. I don't have time to schedule time to think. I don't have time to think. But there's also a cost to that, because when we're able to be more strategic and make better decisions and step back and put things in perspective, we actually can save time and save mistakes. Another strategy here is to be outcome-focused versus to-do list-focused. I know many people love lists, and that's great. It's a strategy that works. But sometimes people fall into overwhelm because they mix everything together. I have to complete this design of this room and the flow of the morning general session, or I got to get this contract out, or I got to get my room block finished. And then they say, and then I got to pick up my laundry, and I got to go to my kid's soccer game, and they start mixing everything together, and it starts to become overwhelming. The concept of outcome versus to-do list is to chunk it by what's the bigger outcome. What are your top 3 to 5 outcomes for a week? Is what I see the folks that are most successful. They really think about the kind of the big chunks, and they focus and say, what am I doing to go get those top things accomplished? And they also realize the 80-20 rule here, that 20% of our actions produce 80% of our results. 20% of our actions give us 80% of our results. The folks that think the game is to get everything done spend a lot of time stressed and overwhelmed. What successful people are able to do is let go of that pressure that it's always about getting everything done, and they learn to get really good at the 20% that's most important. I call it separating the musts from the would-be-nices. Get clear on what your musts are. Schedule those. Focus your time every given week on those musts. It doesn't mean you're not going to get to the would-be-nices, but then you're able to, I call it prioritize and calendarize. Once you have those things prioritized, then move them into your calendar and schedule the musts. Not every moment of every day, but the top 20% that's the must get scheduled into your calendar. Successful folks also consistently are able to focus on quadrant 2. Do you remember what that is? That's part of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Quadrant 2 are those things that are important, but they're not urgent. But what successful folks are able to do is able to create their own sense of urgency around things that are important, like exercise or time with family, or working on strategically around a project at work. Action creates momentum. This is simply the idea of leaning into something. Sometimes, people get caught in their heads around something versus just take action and it starts to change a situation. Lean into something. Because as soon as something's moving, that's when momentum kicks in. It's easier to keep something going than to get something going. So just that first action is also a common strategy to create some movement. And this last one, slow is fast with people, is just, I've found a lot with executives that get really frustrated. A lot of them, kind of the high driver type styles, are like, well, I told them what to do and they're just not doing it. And they get really frustrated, like, well, I told them, and they think if they get louder, it's going to work. And what they've learned is that sometimes that doesn't lead to a result, and all of a sudden it takes 4 or 5 conversations that maybe one conversation would have worked if they would have slowed down and realized they're dealing with people, and it's not just a task or something they can just check off, and it actually can be faster and produce better results, not to mention strengthen and keep the relationship stronger. So those are some common strategies around action. Action planning results in freedom. It creates structure, but it actually creates more freedom. So how about in this area? Go ahead and fill this in your pie, on your wheel of influence. Currently, do you schedule time to be strategic, to prioritize, to reflect, to think, to plan? I find many folks Friday afternoons, Sunday evenings, having a little time to do that. Are you outcome focused or to-do list focused? How often are you functioning quadrant 2? Giving some energy towards things that are important, but not urgent. I saw this question just come in about, handwriting versus digital. I'm a big fan of still kind of handwriting things. I think what works for you is what's most important. I see. If you're trying to do both, sometimes it becomes more complicated. Simplify. This is back to the rules piece, guys. Sometimes we get so caught up in, well, I got to do it this way, or I got to do it. No, do it the way that's going to work for you, which, by the way, is what my program is going to be on in Grapevine. It's help you identify those habits when you're at your best, because your way is the right way if it's leading to execution. There's plenty of strategies. I can share a bunch of stuff with you today. You hear other speakers. You read books on some of these things. How do you plan and get things done? There's so many. There's common themes of what some of those strategies are, some of the things I've shared with you today. But what's most important is what works for you. I would invite you to find out what works and where you're most effective and efficient with. All right, number 6, successful leaders embrace courage. They have the courage to persevere, to learn from their failures. And I say failures as kind of a quote in quotes because, I always tell my daughters, and this started when they were playing sports, but I said, what do you do when you fall down? And they're like, you get up again. And it's just a great analogy for life, is just knowing that there's going to be challenges, there's going to be failures, there's going to be things that knock us down, but it's how we respond to it. But often what happens with adults is we start to create more meaning on what the failure means. And then it keeps us from taking risks. It keeps us from failing. And failing is the quickest way to success, right? Because we can fail at something, and that's where we can learn the quickest. It's also an opportunity to grow. And where we grow is just outside of our comfort zone, right? So to stretch ourselves to grow, and that sometimes it takes courage to be able to do that. Successful leaders are also committed to continuous growth, or the term I like is CNI, continue to never-ending improvement. Always looking to say, what are we doing to tweak this? What are we doing to continue to improve? I do this with my team all the time. Ask, like, what are we doing? What was great? What can we reinforce and build off of? And what are our CNIs? What can we tweak? What can we learn from that we can get better and continue to tweak things? And it's a great habit. We have another video here. Haley, why don't you go ahead and play that now? I think some people are still having a problem hearing. I'm going to probably put my mic next to the volume, and maybe that'll help.
Drama school with a note that read, wasting her time. She's too shy to put her best foot forward. Turned down by the Decca recording company who said, we don't like their sound and guitar music is on the way out. A failed soldier, farmer, and real estate agent. At 38 years old, he went to work for his father as a handyman. Cut from the high school basketball team, he went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. A teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything, and he should go into a field where he might succeed by virtue of his pleasant personality. Fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no original ideas. His fiancée died. He failed in business twice. He had a nervous breakdown, and he was defeated in 8 elections. If you've never failed, you've never lived.
There's a lot of truth to that, have never lived. Because what I've learned is when people challenge themselves and they're able to challenge themselves with a big goal and achieve something, it's what builds self-confidence. They feel alive. They really feel like they're living fully. And it's a great way. It's a great way to build confidence is to challenge yourself with a big goal and to achieve it or don't achieve it. But if you don't achieve it, you're going to quote-unquote fail, and you're going to learn something from it, which is going to help you grow. So you really can't lose. I often work with my clients to really set big goals, to challenge themselves to really think big. And a way to do this, I know some of you may be as suppliers in the industry in a sales role, or some of you are third-party meeting planner, have a third-party meeting planning company where you're in a sales role too. And this could be applied outside of sales as well. But I'll often ask, like, instead of thinking about what would it take to grow your business by 10% or even 20%, I'll ask them, what would it take to double your business? Just to challenge themselves to think outside the box, think outside of really what's possible, and think of strategies maybe they haven't even thought of yet. The common theme I've found is that successful people, they don't wish for things to get easier in their life. They wish for themselves to become more. They don't wish for things to get easier. They wish for themselves to become more. I've had many clients. I had a client recently that's a financial planner that had his best month that he's ever had in his business in his 8-year career, and the following month he doubled it. Because it's kind of like that concept. I've heard this with the 4-minute mile. Once that was broken, Bannister broke that, like that never will be broken, and then in the next year it was broken, I don't know these exact stats, but it's like 100 times. Because we break through the beliefs of what we think is possible. It's so powerful. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that I find that once they've achieved something, they build that muscle, they get stronger. And I have many of them that the same situation that came up, maybe it's a year later after they've done some work, and they look back and the same situation happens externally, and now it's instead of it being a brick wall in their life, it becomes a speed bump. Still may have some effect, but they barely feel it because they've become more. Their muscle's gotten bigger. The external factors haven't changed. Their response and who they are has changed. And that's what happens when we're growing, when we have the courage to step out of our comfort zone and to become more. Love this. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Great question to reflect on. Embracing courage results in growth. So go ahead and reflect on this on your wheel of influence. Do you find yourself committed to continuous growth? Or are you kind of playing it safe? Is this an area that you could grow? Are you learning from your failures and growing and persevering? Do you believe in yourself to persevere? Go ahead and fill where you are in this area. You should be starting to look at your wheel and kind of see where maybe some of those areas that are strong that you want to continue, and maybe you see an area that you really want to focus on maybe in the coming month to give some focus and attention to help balance out your wheel. Number 7, successful leaders build a success team. This is something I learned in having my own business. Is I had this feeling like, oh, I gotta do it all on my own. I gotta work hard, and it's got to be hard, which isn't necessarily true. Being able to identify what we do best and then outsource the things that we can, both personally and professionally, as much as we can. Finding partners is a common one. Finding people that you can partner with that when you worked. I remember when I started my business and I was doing seminars at the YMCAs, and I had a colleague that I connected with that had some different strengths, and we collaborated and built an Energize Your Life program. That was great. Also identify mentors and coaches. And there's a distinction here. I believe we need both. Mentors are people that have been down the road we want to travel. Maybe they're, a meeting planner, a senior meeting planner that's been in the business 10 years longer that you could really learn from. Or maybe they're on a corporate side, which is different than the association side, and something you could learn from them. Maybe you want to run a marathon or a half marathon, and you talk to people who've done it, and they're sharing the strategies of how to go from A to B because they've done it. That's a mentor. A coach is someone that isn't necessarily an expert in your business or your industry, maybe haven't even done what you want to accomplish, but they have an expertise in understanding the psychology and mindset and strategies that help close the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And then a mastermind group is really an association. I mean, really PCMA and MPI, the idea you can come together in an association with other meeting planners, with other colleagues that have similar challenges. I'm seeing this a lot at conferences now. I do a whole program on collective intelligence. Instead of delivering more content, is creating a space and facilitating a process that helps the folks in the room tap into their collective intelligence that's going to help solve problems and share ideas and resources that are relevant to the folks in the room. And I belong to a mastermind group with other speakers and trainers and facilitators where we get together every other month. We spend about 6 hours together. And it's a time, it's like, oh my gosh, that's coming up next week. Do I have the time for it? But once again, when you get together with a small group of people to mastermind and focus on helping you solve some challenges or problems, powerful stuff comes out of those. It can be very effective. So that's the concept of a mastermind group that I find many successful folks are a part of. All right, with Success Team. Success Team results in efficiency. So go ahead with this part of your wheel. Do you currently have a success team, or maybe do you have some gaps? Is this an area that you could grow in? Would it help you to find a mentor or a coach, or to start or join or be a part of a mastermind group? Go ahead and fill where you are on this one. And then the last one is successful leaders appreciate. They know that what they focus on and appreciate grows. They know when they're grateful that gratitude removes fear. They're also able to focus outside themselves. Often we get in our heads, and that's what keeps us, we kind of that self-talk, we get in our heads, and it's keeping us from really performing at a higher level. I see this as a speaker sometimes, where I'm like, I can get in my head and say, well, did I cover that point, or do I look good, or does this, and you get caught up in that versus this is about focusing outside myself. What's the impact? When we're able to do that and get out of our own stuff, that's when we can have the biggest impact, and appreciate that it's an opportunity to be in front of a group, to have influence on a group. Another strategy is being present. You ever find that you're at work thinking about your home life, and then you're at home thinking about your work life? Why can't we just be where we are when we're there? Very powerful, being able to be present, to be in the moment, to be fully engaged in what you're doing when you're doing it. And that's a muscle that can be built and can be strengthened. It's something I'm still working on. And having perspective. Everything's always relative. And be able to keep things in perspective that we're dealing with in life. I recently, a year ago February, almost exactly a year ago, I got a call from the doctor and I found out that I had an aneurysm in my ascending aorta and I needed open heart surgery at 44 years old. What? I don't have time for this. I mean, I got a speech in Chicago in 3 days. I'm coaching my daughter's basketball team, and the playoffs start next week. And I have a trip planned, a Valentine's Day trip planned with my wife to go to Puerto Vallarta. No, this doesn't work for me. This is not good timing. They told me it wasn't an emergency, just sometime in the next 5 to 6 months. So they said, you really should go on your trip. But the day before we left, we had a 7 a.m. flight. I decided, you know what? I don't want to end up in a Mexican hospital with this. I want to go in one more time, just get one more ultrasound just to make sure everything's okay. And I go in, and the technician looks at the screen and goes, oh. And I'm like, oh? She goes, you know what? I don't have the cardiologist look at this. She goes and gets the cardiologist. He comes in. He looks at the screen and goes, oh. And then he looks over at me and says, sir, are you currently experiencing any chest pain? I am now. Tells me they'd like the other cardiologist to look at it as well, who's currently at the hospital. So he said, let me get your cell phone. I'll call you in a little bit. I'm leaving the hospital. I'm driving by the emergency room thinking, should I just kind of pull in and hang out here? I drive home. He calls me a little over an hour later. Bags are packed, getting ready to go on our trip. We have a 7 a.m. flight, and he says, you know what, it could be nothing, and you're fine to go on your trip, and I think it would be good for you to go on your trip. Or it could be that the aneurysm's starting to split, and you need emergency open heart surgery. And the only way to know for sure is to get a CAT scan. So then my wife and I are driving to the emergency room, and we're in the car, and we're thinking, in 12 hours, we're either on a beach in Puerto Vallarta drinking a Mai Tai, or I'm in emergency open heart surgery. How's that for perspective? The CAT scan came back negative. We were able to go and have a nice trip, and I did come back and have a successful surgery on March 24th of last year. But what that's left me with, one of the biggest lessons is to be able to keep the perspective, be able to, look at myself in the bathroom in the morning and seeing a scar on my chest is a great reminder to start a day. What's so important that day that I can't have some perspective, to have some appreciation and gratitude? But everyone has their thing. Everyone has experience. Everyone on this call right now is dealing with challenges, maybe of a loved one or health issues or financial issues or job with their profession or with their relationships. And when we can really find that part of us that can be present and be grateful and appreciate, we can really, on a daily basis, experience happiness. So how about this last area? How are you doing with appreciation? Are you able to demonstrate gratitude? Focus outside yourself. Be able to keep that perspective. Remain present. This is a journey, folks. This isn't something you can check the box and say, all right, I got it done. Because I know meeting planners. I've worked with a lot of meeting planners, a lot of type A's. It's a journey. It's a process. I do this wheel every so often just to reconnect, get present to it, and say, what's next? What's the area I need to focus on now to get it back in balance? The key is really to enjoy the journey. It's not to think it's a box that you can check, but rather that it's the journey itself. I've learned this in helping people set goals a long time ago. I've helped people achieve great goals and become number one in sales or to achieve that promotion or run that marathon, whatever their goal is. And then a little time passes and they're like, oh, is that it? Sometimes we think that this goal achievement is going to be the end all of everything. But the reality is it's the journey itself. It's the idea that we're being challenged, what I shared about courage, when we're growing, when we're becoming more. That's what brings us fulfillment. That's what brings us to happiness. Growing as a leader is the same thing. It's a journey. It's a process. So I'd like you to take a moment now to reflect on your wheel and look at where are the areas that you have a strength, that you're like, this is really strong. These are things that I want to continue because I have good strength in this area. It's a good balance for me. And then secondly, to choose an area today that you want to focus on, that you know if you improve in this area, it would have the most significant impact on balancing your wheel and ultimately supporting your success as a leader and your ability to influence. So take a moment now and choose what that is. And I also would say use the chat. Start sending in some of this. Send in some of your, here's my area I'm going to focus on. Just write, vision or balance. And then write either what your commitment is, what your action step is, or what your new strategy you've identified from the session today that you're committed to that's going to have the biggest impact for you. And there's something about when we put things out there, when we share things with other people. So I'd love to see a lot of these come in on the chat. Just pick, this is my area, and this is my strategy, or this is my action I'm going to take based on what I heard today. I'm going to give you just another 30 seconds to do this, and then I will take a look, and we can open it up for comments in the chat, as well as any questions I'll be happy to address with the time that we have left. All right. I'll have a chance to kind of glance at some of these that are coming in on the chat as well. But Haley, have you seen any questions that have come in that would be good for me to address that would be beneficial for everyone? I see a lot of balance coming in, some action planning.
Hey, Dean, I did see some questions before people started sending in what they want to work on. Stephanie from Chicago was asking, what did focusing on your strengths result in? She said she missed that. So if you want to repeat that.
Focusing on our strengths results in fulfillment and performance. Fulfillment and performance.
Okay. Also, Adam Shoemaker from Chicago, he asked, do you have multiple industries as part of your mastermind group, offering a different look at the topics?
You know what? I've done it both ways. I've belonged over the years. I did one where my first one I said, I'm just going to get the smartest people I admire and respect in different industries and get them all in a room. And I took a lot of value from that for that exact reason. You can get different perspectives from people. And you also don't have the dynamic. Sometimes when you get the same industry, some people feel some competition, but the folks who feel that way are probably not the right fit for the group anyway. And I probably would say I've taken a little more value from the ones that have more relevant challenges that I do and have similar businesses. I've probably learned a little bit more, but I recommend either. You're going to take a lot of value if you get a great great group of people together.
That's all the questions we had before. We are getting questions about if you want to share your slide deck. I think we've got a lot of people interested in being able to review these post-webinar.
Yeah, I have some summaries that my team will send out afterwards. I think we have an opportunity we can do a blast afterwards if we have whoever attended and send out some additional resources. We can do that. anything else has come in. Fulfillment and purpose. Yeah, I love this from Adam too. You know, I get lost in the hustle a lot. It's tough to stop and just take it in. You know, an area to work on. You know, one strategy I've learned there is just as soon as you become aware, it's just breathing, simple breathing. It just takes a moment, and also that's what helps kind of get us back in the present. And it's back to the limiting belief that we think more time always equals more results is just not true.
Dean, I think it's funny that since we've got a lot of event planners watching this, that a lot of them are saying they need to work on balance, which isn't very surprising because like event planners do so much. Like finding the balance for that is just crazy. So no surprise there.
It is. I would still invite you as meeting planners is to identify. My session in Grapevine will help you do this as well, but it's help identify what are some of those success habits. What are those things that help you show up as the best you? Because when you're at your best, you get more done in less time. You're more efficient. You're more effective. You're thinking clearly. It's back what I shared about my client that owned the restaurants and the 8-minute meditation. What is and don't have rules on it. Don't make it sound like I got to do I'd have to get up at 2 a.m. to be able to do those 4 hours. It doesn't have to be 4 hours. You can do a lot of these things in minutes. So be easy on yourself. Keep it simple. Identify some of those habits that are going to help you. And then the other one I would say is break up the day a little bit. I know that feeling is there's never enough time. There's so much on your plates. But I'm talking about simple, taking a few breaths. Going out and feeling the sunshine or going for a short walk for a couple minutes, and it will help you break it up, and you'll actually be more effective than just trying to push through it. Is anything else?
I think you just answered Linda's question. She was asking for tips on achieving balance when working from home. And Kim Fields responded, Linda, I work from home, close the laptop at 5 p.m. and leave work. I think we all struggle with that.
I think being able to separate the space is something that works there. Being able to say, here's your home, this is your workspace, you're in work environment, you're dressed for work, whatever. Then say, I'm leaving work, I'm going to go see the kids, or I'm going to change and put on more comfortable clothes, or whatever. And I know some people work in their pajamas or whatever, but whatever that is for you, but actually separating that time because a lot of people work somewhere else, they have that time on the drive home where they flip on the radio, they kind of have that transition time. Those of us that work from home, it's finding and creating that transition. We have to do that with intention. So I would just come up with some type of habit that helps you transition, leave that space, and start afresh with your evening, with your family.
Sophie Curtis from Texas says, focus on what can go right instead of what could go wrong. Gabby Berman says, Sophie, that is so true.
Absolutely. Get more of what we focus on. And our brains have a tendency to focus on the negative or focus on maybe what's not working. So that's a muscle to build as well. And you can do that by asking a powerful question. What's great in the situation? What can I appreciate about this? What can I learn from this? It's a good habit. All right, just to keep us on time, unless there's any other burning questions, I think you had some final comments, Haley, but I am very grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the webinar today. I hope to meet some of you in Grapevine in person during the event in August, and thanks for your investment of your time here today.
Thank you, Dean. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us today. It's much appreciated. As I mentioned, and we've mentioned throughout the webinar, you can see Dean speak in person at our annual Connect Marketplace show, which is happening August 25th through 27th in Grapevine, Texas. You can learn more. I'm going to flip the slide real quick. You can learn more about Connect Marketplace at connectmarketplace.com, which is shown on your screen now. You can also learn about our past and upcoming webinars on all of our websites listed on your screen now. If you have any questions, please email me. It's hpanagakis@connectmeetings.com, listed on your screen so you don't have to spell it. Thanks again for attending, everyone. We hope that you'll join us on April 20th for Social Media, the Fine Line Between Professional and Personal, that will be presented by another Connect Marketplace speaker, Jared Beard, and sponsored by the Providence Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you all have a great day.